TV shows in county jail and prison. Which ones are the most loved by pretty much every inmate and are a must watch anytime they come on? And which ones, if you are caught watching them, will put you into a very bad situation or possibly even cause you to get some metal stuck into you? That's what I'm going to go over in this video. And let's go ahead and start with the good and end with the bad. What are the shows that the inmates love the most? And before I do these top three, anytime basketball or football is on, that's law. That's set in stone. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's getting watched. And the news, morning, afternoon, and night. Anytime the news is on, that's getting watched. No exceptions. So that's kind of a given. Put those aside, and now let's get into the top three, just more specific, not as obvious shows that these inmates love. Number one, and these are in no specific order, on the subject of sports that are definitely getting watched, you might as well add women's volleyball to that list. Obviously, it starts out all these men, these inmates, they're going to want to watch it because it's women's volleyball and they're out there in their bikinis in the sand. That is 100% the reason why they want to begin watching any tournament, classic, open, whatever, that appears on TV, on ESPN or any type of sports network that we're able to watch on these TVs. And everybody's down there watching. Oh man, yeah. Oh man, look at her. So it's obviously you got a bunch of men been locked up. That's what they want to watch, and they love it. They love it. But it's kind of cool in a way, even though it starts out. They're just wanting to watch purely because of the fact that it's girls in bikinis out there playing and diving around. By the end of it, and if you've ever watched like women's or men's volleyball, I mean, just a volleyball match, they're pretty talented. And I mean, these matches get pretty intense. And by the end of it, a lot of guys can actually appreciate the volleyball matches just for the sport just as much as appreciating it for being able to see some hot in shape chicks in their bikinis out there running around. So by the end of it, they'll actually be really into it. They'll have their favorite team, who they like best, because they just really just made some great plays. And it's kind of cool to see it, even though it starts out one way, just end in a just love of the sport, love of the game type of way. So that's number one. Number two, it's kind of for the same reasons as the first, as to why all the inmates like to watch it. But don't worry, I mean, not all three are because of chicks. Okay, so stay tuned for number three. It's actually much, much different and for a very different reason as to why the inmates really love to watch it. So stick around for number three. But number two, kind of the same thing. It's a channel called Telemundo. More specifically, like the news. I don't really remember if Telemundo is all news, like a whole news, just constant news channel. But they tune into Telemundo when it's news time. I'll tell you that, because it's kind of it's an all Spanish channel. So like most of the guys, at least the ones I've been around when they were watching it, pretty much none spoke Spanish. So I know they don't even know what's being said, and they don't care. That's not why they watch it. They don't care what's going on in Tijuana. They're watching because the news anchors are literally all very beautiful, attractive Hispanic Latino women who are wearing some very form-fitting and kind of revealing dresses or skirts, and they're doing the weather, and all that stuff, and just same thing. Guys are just, oh man, God, look at her, looky. That's the whole concept of that. So, but Telemundo, you'll hear that a lot. Telemundo, it'll always, like, if there's like 4 TVs in the common area, on that very last TV, you'll pretty much always have Telemundo set permanently to that channel because they love watching that. There's always some beautiful Hispanic woman on there. Now, number 3, like I said, this one's a bit different. This show, it is the First 48. And if you don't know what First 48 is, that's kind of a A&E network show. That's usually about how, what happens during the first 48 hours of a murder investigation for the detectives at the local law enforcement who are assigned to investigate any type of homicides. During that first 48 hours, since they get that first call, like, hey, we need you down here. We got a body, we got a victim. So they kind of have the clock running on this 48-hour thing, because apparently after that first 48, see what I did there? First 48, that's the name of the show. It becomes however many times more difficult. This is apparently a proven thing, to solve that murder. So this first 48 hours is very important. So it kind of follows the detectives and just their processes as to how they find out who it is, their leads, the investigation, or they figure out who did it. And then it's like, let's track them down, and get that arrest made. And it always ends the same. They catch the guy, pretty much always catch the guy. And it ends with like this interrogation portion. And the reason Inmates, more specifically, I'll give some context here because it's relevant. It's more of a county jail popular show than prison, because if you don't know, some people don't know, there's a big difference between jail and prison. Jail is pretty much where you are when you've been arrested for a crime, but you haven't been to court, been found guilty, and been sentenced to prison time. And of course, prison, once you're found guilty and sentenced to prison time, you go to prison to serve that time. So people in county jail love it because they hadn't been to court yet. They haven't, they don't know if they're necessarily going to be found guilty or not. And these guys love to watch it because there are a lot of guys in there for murder or attempted murder or things kind of on that level. And they love to watch how these guys get caught, what pieces of evidence got these guys caught just as a suspect to where they end up being interrogated. And then they love to watch how these guys handle themselves or what they said or what they didn't say in these interrogations, because I feel, this is just my opinion from just my observations, I feel that most of these guys are kind of comparing these cases to their own. What was said, how much did they say, and how much did I say, how much did they not say, or maybe he refused to say anything. And a lot of times, I've seen quite a few episodes against my will. There's only one TV in there a lot of times, and I've just had to watch it. It's not my favorite show, not my number one pick, but it's not all up to me. So I've watched it many times, and usually every blue moon, there's a guy who refuses to say anything in these interrogations, and he is probably the one who gets away with it or like doesn't get found guilty. Because at the end of the show, they'll always kind of put the text on the screen like so-and-so was sentenced to 20 years or life, or, and sometimes it's like so-and-so was found not guilty, or, charges were dropped because there was not enough evidence, blah, blah, blah. And so these guys, I think they like to watch it just to kind of compare to how their interview went or what they said or didn't say and what these guys did or didn't say, and like what evidence was there for them. And maybe, is that the kind of evidence I have, or is that more than I had or less than I had? So maybe I'm screwed. See what I'm saying? So that's really why it's a big favorite of a lot of these guys in county jail to watch, because I think it just helps them get some more insight into what's the likely outcome for the charges I'm in here for right now. So there's number 3. There's your 3 favorite shows amongst inmates. And now let's get to the 3 most hated shows by most inmates. And if it's not a hated show by you and you like to watch it, probably going to bring you some problems. So for the most hated, number 1, and I say none of these are any specific order, and they're not, but if there was one that needs to be at the top of a list, so for most hated, definitely needs to be this one, because this is the number 1 show you don't need to be watching in prison. Now, I get if you have kids and you're watching it with your kids out there in the free world, that's different, all that, to each their own. But like in jail, in prison, where you kind of got to keep an extra close eye out for anyone who might be, kind of, child molester, pedophile, things like that. Do not watch the Disney Channel. Don't turn it on the Disney Channel. Nobody wants to watch it. Nobody wants to be caught dead watching it. If you want to watch the Disney Channel, you're going to catch some crap, some major heat. Okay. And I think part of that comes from the fact that, see, in my county jail, for instance, they have A blocks, B block, C block, D block, all the way to Z. And like Z is reserved for the known sex offenders, child molesters, pedophiles, anyone with charges like that. Even though you'll catch a few out there in the general population for whatever reason. Don't know. But most of them are kind of just instantly housed together. And anytime you walk by there, because all these cell blocks have like, windows into them. So if you're walking to medical or anything, you can just kind of look in there. It's like, what are these creeps doing in here? You look in there and you look on the TV and it's the Disney Channel all the time. And I think that just kind of just went hand in hand. And don't be some random guy watching the Disney Channel where it's nothing but kids and preteen girls or boys. There's just no reason to watch it. There's no show on Disney Channel good enough. Like I said, I get it. If you're a good dad, you're a good mom, and you got your kids and they love Disney Channel and you're just on the couch with them having a nice family TV night. Not, totally unrelated here. If you're in prison with a bunch of grown men and you want to watch Wizards of Waverly Place or Hannah Montana or The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, don't do it. They're going to call you out. It's pretty much a known thing. You can probably ask any prison content creator and they'll confirm. I don't think there's any disagreement here. Very suspicious if you're caught watching that. It's just not a good look. And so everyone knows to stay away from it. So that's number one. Number two, this is going to fire some people up. I understand that. But I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you the truth. And hopefully that's why you clicked on the video, because you want to hear how it is. And keep in mind, I'm talking about prisons in South Carolina, down south, right? Duck Dynasty. And this, maybe it would be different if we were in some type of prison system where, you do have these racial based gangs. These gangs are kind of split up based on what your race is. Latin, Hispanic, Caucasian, Black, white, whatever. That's not the way it is in South Carolina. You got Bloods, Crips, and Gangster Disciples, growth and development, whatever you want to call it. They go by both. But it's predominantly Black majority gangs. Okay. So they kind of have the most influence and the most power. I mean, they just have the numbers. That's just the structure of the South Carolina prison systems. Not to say that every white guy in South Carolina prison is just a wimp. They're not. But that's just kind of the general structure. And so whenever the TV is put on Duck Dynasty, where you got a bunch of country boys, a bunch of rednecks, you could say, in camo out there doing it, it's just kind of this assumption, this general stereotype and assumption that they're all racist. All those guys on the show are racist. That's how the other inmates feel. Okay. It just is. And I say that based off the various and many arguments I've seen start up because a Black inmate suspects a white inmate who turns it to Duck Dynasty and is like really into the show. They're like, man, you like watching that racist show, man. You must be racist. And I mean, that's all it takes for some crap to start, So I mean, that's just the fact of it. If you love that show enough to risk a pretty high probability of getting into an argument and maybe a physical altercation with somebody over watching it, hey, eat your heart out. If you're there to do your time and you would like to just, any reasonable way to avoid issues, you're trying to take them so that you can just make it on out of there, maybe don't watch Duck Dynasty. Number 3. Modern Family. And, thinking about this, I guess I should say, I'm sure most of these are kind of specific and relevant to the year and kind of the time frame that I was in prison, because, hey, no TV show is going to be on forever. So maybe in 15, 20 years, none of these shows will apply and none of it will be relevant or accurate. But for the time being, and, I have gotten out of prison like a year and a half ago. So this is all pretty fresh still, I would say. But for this kind of time frame in this era, there was a lot of reruns, a lot of episodes every day of Modern Family coming on. Very popular show, and it's got a couple couples on there, and one of the couples is a gay couple, right? And the reason is, like even me personally, I always thought the show was very funny. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's not important. But it's the fact that there's a gay couple on there. And I guess when you're in prison, you're in jail. it's not that I think anyone really cared or really had such a big issue with the fact that there's a gay couple on there. I think it's more that everyone's so worried about what the other people will think if they're caught just watching and just casually enjoying the show, you know, that maybe they'll be good. Hey, you're okay with this gay stuff, because that's a big thing in prison, especially South Carolina prisons. Everyone, they're not okay with that, and a lot of gangs have these very specific rules. You're not allowed to engage or participate in any type of homosexual activity, things like that. And so everyone tries to distance themselves and stay far away from anything closely or barely related. So, that show will be on, and the parts come on where you have the gay couple, and everyone just kind of gets uncomfortable about, I need to make sure I make it clear that oh man, like I think everybody just needs to kind of pull one of those so that they feel like everybody knows that I'm, no reason to look at me funny. I think that's basically what it is. And even I specifically, I literally almost got into a fight in the county jail. After I'd been there like a year and a half, and I almost got in a fight with some guy because I had turned it on that show and I was watching it, and that part came on, and he made like a little remark or a comment, from the back of the cell block about, man, some of these boys suspect because they like watching this stuff. I'm like, and it was more about the fact that, like, man, you just, brother, don't even try to say nothing about me. You 5 feet. You're 5 foot. I'm 6. we can fight right now just for even trying to just cause me issues or cause the dorm to turn against me. Like we can just get it on right now. But yeah, so even me personally, I personally experienced almost an altercation because just for watching that show. So I know others have, and I've seen it. And so that's my number 3. Now, we've gone over the top 3 loved, the top 3 hated. Let me do an honorable mention for the loved, because this deserves to be in there because I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool. American Ninja Warrior. If you don't know, it's kind of a competition where people, women, men who are, even some kids are like some like really young, like teens or something sometime, who are really in shape, but everyone's really in shape, really physically capable. They're exercising all year. That's their whole thing. They get on these big obstacle courses, and it's just all this climbing and pull-ups and just feats of, kind of calisthenic style strength, and that's enjoyed by a lot of inmates because a lot of inmates kind of pass their time by exercising. And there's no free weights. There's no dumbbells and machines in my prisons. You got a pull-up bar, and you got like maybe something you can climb, maybe like some like metal things, buried in the ground that kind of let you do the dips or the raised push-ups a little bit. And that's about it. And guys will run the steps. They'll kind of they'll get very creative with how they get these kind of body weight, calisthenic style exercise, workouts in. So it is kind of cool that people that's how they spend all their time, in prison, just kind of like, hey, I'm knocking these days and years out by just staying in shape. Fitness, that's kind of what I'm diving into. And that's a pretty, considering all the things you could let yourself fall into in prison, that's a pretty positive and healthy thing to fall into. And so to see that shine through in the other little ways of their prison bid, that's pretty cool. I do workouts, I do pull-ups, I do this, and they really get into fitness. And so they like to, they enjoy watching things like American Ninja Warrior. I think that's pretty cool. So that's worth mentioning. That's a pretty popular show too. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it gave you some insight, information, and if nothing else, some entertainment. Thanks for watching. See you next time.